again. I'm here again with Rob Harvey, and Rob's been telling us and teaching us about ghosts, and he's told a story before, and he's got another one for us today. And this involves a very particular kind of gentleman, ex-military, who didn't really like what was going on in his house. So Rob, share with us this story.
Well, this is a typical ghost story, if you like. There's many of them. Everyone's slightly different. But again, this is someone who died a long time ago, maybe decades ago, and he didn't want to move on. You have free will. You don't automatically move over to the next world, and he didn't want to move on. So what happened with this one, someone contacted me, and they could sense something going on in the house. So they thought they had a ghost in the house, a spirit in the house. But typical human nature as well, their sensing was correct. There was someone in the house. But then every time a radiator made a noise or something, any noise in the house, they put it down to it. So they started to scare themselves. And so they were worried this was some sort of evil spirit, which it wasn't. So after they contacted me, I had been to this particular house before. So from my own home, I start concentrating on the house. And as a medium, this is where you've got to be very careful because your mind gets in the way. So I concentrated on this particular house on several different occasions until I got it right. And initially I could sense someone in the house. Often you can sense quite a few different people, but that doesn't mean that's the one that's a problem in the house. Right. As I mentioned before, there are millions of wandering spirits on the earth plane. It doesn't mean any of them are a problem. But there was something going on with this house. And when I started to sense who it was, then you've got to be careful with your own mind, because your own mind, unfortunately, think, oh, it might be someone evil, it might be something evil. And rarely it is someone evil. That is a rare occurrence. That's not a normal occurrence. Anyway, with this particular house, this gentleman, you could sense him in the house, and he wasn't evil or anything else whatsoever. He was wandering around this house, and then he didn't like the living room, where the television was. He didn't like it. And what was taking place, they were playing something on the television, which he didn't like. Now, if you understand, he's been there for decades. I didn't know the situation exactly to begin with, but he had been there for decades. And probably what people may play on television nowadays wouldn't have been in those days. So he didn't like it. Right. And also, I was picking up with him that the house across the road, he didn't like that house either. So he wasn't just in this house. He was in this area in what it was, but he didn't like a house across the road, what they were playing on there. Once I realised this is what it was, and this wasn't an evil person, this is just a soul who had chosen not to leave, is what it was about. And then, so this is his free will to stay there and wander in this area, and this happens all the time. So then once I've sensed what the situation was, it's my free will, and I asked for a couple of his friends to come back again, which happens straight away. So even though I'm not there, I can see this taking place. And I could see him talking to his friends. They had a long conversation. And then he turned around and nodded to me, and off he went with them. And you could sense he was very serious, and an army type person is what he was. He was, everything had to be done properly, done this way. And that's who he was. And so he disappeared, and they had no problems in the house anymore. And it was interesting afterwards because after I told him he'd gone and everything else, the conversation came up. This entire area was army barracks. Oh. So he was an officer in the army is who he was. I don't know what his name or anything else, it's irrelevant. But he'd lived there his entire life. So very serious life, everything organised, everything else as you would be. He didn't believe in life after death or anything else. When he passed over, he stayed in the area because that's where he was comfortable. And then in that area, all these houses were built.
And it was changed, wasn't it?
It was changed. Yeah. So he wasn't happy with the change, but he was coping with the change. But then what was being played on the televisions in this particular situation is why people were sensing him, because he was getting upset over it all. That's what it was.
Okay.
The point is, he's moved on, he's gone to the other side, and that's absolutely fine. And this is very common where someone doesn't believe in anything, life after death, anything whatsoever. They're very used to a certain situation, and I often come across ones that aren't causing any problems at all, but they may have lived in a house or a mansion, whatever it is, for a long period of time, and it's their free will, they don't want to leave it.
Right, so the fact that you don't believe in life after death, that is probably what got him stuck, but the fact it was exacerbated by the fact that he didn't agree with what he was saying.
It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
If you can get the message across to people, people don't have to understand everything about mediumship, but if you can get the message that there is life after death, then when people die, they've got that question in their mind, hang on, there is, I had a message, I was proof that there's life after death. Then they're open to the possibility of it. When they're open to the possibility, their free will is to look to see if there is something else there, and they tend to move on. The average person, when they die, normally moves on, but someone who's got free will, who really doesn't want to leave, they don't leave.
So interesting. And interesting that you mentioned the history, that you found out that that was a barracks. That kind of confirms everything that's been kind of
Yes,
happening.
indeed. Yeah.
And I was going to ask you about the history, whether we can double check in these situations, and that was
we can do. I normally I don't. All I am interested in is to help the soul that is still in the house. That's all that matters. So I don't normally go down that path. As long as they've moved on and the people haven't got a problem in the house, that is all that matters. But often in these cases, you do find later on this information comes back, and then it starts to make sense. But with all these things, you've got to use your senses, what's going on. And if you start doing research and everything else, your mind can get in the way.
Right.
And if you did research beforehand that it used to be army barracks, you might immediately presume it's an army person.
Right.
And that could be wrong. It might have nothing to do with the army. So from my point of view, I'd rather have a clear mind and just sort the situation.
Right, like a blank slate to go
Yes,
in with, rather than.
So I can trust my senses.
Absolutely. That is just fascinating. And it also proves the point that we very much cross as we are, which you have mentioned before.
100%.
So the character is the same as we are in the flesh. And it also makes me realize and wonder, this is a particular kind of person that was not going to suffer fools, was not having this on his watch.
Exactly.
But a different kind of character that passes, that maybe is more gentle and remains gentle, and does not speak up for themselves. There must be so many people with that kind of personality that are stuck or confused.
There are. There's loads of very, very gentle souls in houses, all sorts of places where they used to live, who have no understanding or belief. There's no problem with them. They're there. They have chosen not to move on. There's no hassle, no problem. Often, when they start changing the house, or the house is replaced by another house or something else, they get upset. But you can have souls there for decades and decades, and they're just quite happy being there, absolutely happy. But sooner or later, the next world is awaiting them.
Right, and it's usually a change which shifts their understanding, maybe there.
Exactly.
And everything. Well, thank you, Rob. I think we're running out of time again. I want to thank you again for checking in. And if you have any comments about today's story, please share with us and keep sharing your questions. We love to hear them. We know your time is precious. Thanks for spending time.